Hi, and welcome to the Success with Savitha podcast. I'm very excited to have you here today because I know I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be very different from the ones I'm used to. And it's a huge honor to have you here. I've been reading your bio. I've been looking at your work. You've had such an illustrious career. So welcome to the show and welcome to our conversation.
Hey, thank you, Savitha, and the pleasure is all mine. This subject is quite dear to me, and so I'm looking forward to talking about it. Feel free.
All right. With that, let's dive right in. Like we say, let's start with your journey and your story and what brought you to the role that you handle now at Wadhwani Foundation.
Well, I basically did the typical engineering undergrad at an IIT, and then I went off and did my master's in the US. And then did my first set of entrepreneurial. I worked for a little bit, and then I did my first set of entrepreneurial stints in the US. In fact, along with my brother-in-law as a co-founder. And we did have some early successes. And in fact, one of the startups that brought me to Bangalore to do the usual thing, that was to start a software development center. Little did I know how much India had to offer. And we besides just doing software development, we actually ended up doing a whole bunch of other things like, inbound and outbound marketing, technical support, finance, even sales outside the US, and many other functions besides the software engineering that a typical startup goes off and does. Post that particular startup, I did a slew of other startups. Some, of course, were great successes, and some others were miserable failures. Successes, of course, tends to keep you going. And of course, the failures, you take it with a stride, and I let them become great learning lessons for myself. My last startup, which got acquired by a Chicago-based company, I was with them for a couple of years, and it was during that time that I decided that, I've done a bunch of startups, had a few successes, it's time to give back. And I decided that my next startup would actually be around creating impact. And while I was trying to brainstorm a bunch of different ideas and modeling out different startups around agri-tech and fintech and a bunch of other things that I tried to do, and I realized that, it takes 5 years to do a startup. And at the end of 5 years, you realize it's a success or a failure. And for however much experience you have, it still is always a challenge, right? So, but along the way, I got a call from a search agency, executive search agency, and they were, it was for Wadhwani Foundation that they were looking for somebody to sort of run a bunch of their initiatives and also run a global technology platform across 20 different countries that they have. So being an entrepreneur myself, of course, I would have not given it a second shot. But upon learning the mission and the kind of impact that the foundation was making, I did decide to pursue it. And one of the obviously one thing led to another, but a final conversation with Ramesh Wadhwani and Ajay Kela, I got convinced that this would be perhaps the best way to do a most meaningful, impactful startup that I could ever do. And then, of course, in the kind of initiatives that I was going to run, it would keep me close to the startup ecosystem and the SME ecosystem, which is what I cherish being part of, because that's what I've done throughout my life. So that's how my journey with Wadhwani Foundation started. I hope that kind of answers what you're looking for.
Yes, and I think I know you've really put it down in the shortest possible sharing of your journey, and I know that there's so much to it. Of course, we'll unpack some of that along this conversation. But at Wadhwani Foundation, you have a strong focus on women entrepreneurship. Can you share with us the big picture thinking behind this? While a lot of people are getting into this space, we are putting a huge amount of focus on female entrepreneurship. How do you feel that female entrepreneurship impacts the Indian economy, society, and community?
Yeah, that's a great question, Savitha. I think women entrepreneurship is actually very dear to me, and in a way very personal to me also. And in fact, it is to all the employees at Wadhwani Foundation. But I say personal as well, not my first, the third software startup, which went on to become successful, was actually started by my wife. Her name is Kalpa, and she had absolutely no background in software products or software engineering. But her sheer grit and determination to do something radically different made her build a really fine software company. She went on to employ close to about 200 engineers, and in fact managed to convert an originally what she started as a software services company into a product company, and that became one of the first few product companies out of India. So I think that is why it is very personal to me. But as such, for Wadhwani Foundation, we really strive to support entrepreneurs because they are job creators who can make a significant positive difference in emerging economies like ours. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the women entrepreneurship side. India has close to about, I would say about 430 million working age women and about 14 million women-owned businesses that are out there that provide direct employment to more than about 25 million people, right? However, very interestingly, a number of the enterprises that are reported as women-owned are not really controlled or run by women. It's a combination of financial and administrative reasons that leads to a woman being reported as a on-paper owner with little role to play in the organization. Now, if you, according to, in fact, McKinsey Global, India can potentially add close to about $700 billion into the global GDP by increasing women's participation in the labor force. In fact, by McKinsey itself, according to them, more than 44 more million, incremental million women will actually enter the workforce by 2030. So I mean, these are huge numbers, right? So I feel that when women entrepreneurs, women become entrepreneurs, they make a huge difference in more ways than one. Not just the economy, but as you rightly pointed out, even in your question, that they bring about a transformation at a societal and community level, right? When you provide equal access to inputs, women-owned enterprises produce equally strong, and this is it's world over, right? I mean, they produce equally strong economic outcomes when compared with enterprises that are led by men. So it's not like there is any kind of inferiority over there. And what entrepreneurship does to women is something radically different, right? Which is they end up playing a pivotal role rather than just a peripheral role in the economic sphere. In fact, women that work, they often start creating a very cascading effect for other women. So what I mean by that is women are more likely to hire other women and are less influenced by gender stereotypes. Also, as women entrepreneurs experience greater financial independence, autonomy and control, it leads to an increased retention of women in the workforce, which is again very important because a lot of women, they come into workforce and then they have to leave very quickly. A majority of the women believe working for themselves reduces their dependence on a spouse or family, and therefore an equally large number of them also view it as a means to break through the glass ceiling, which is always something that they are under. So a woman founder is also more likely to implement programs to encourage other women with potential through skill set building or training to become ready to take on more responsibilities at a higher level in the organization, including some of the revenue generating roles in sales, etc., which oftentimes in India at least you don't find a lot of women doing. And then of course, as a women founder, you sort of are more empathetic towards the challenges that are faced by women, the other women, and you tend to propose fairly conducive policies like maternity leaves and extended maternity leaves, adoption policies, building of crashes in the nearby areas, or it could be just a break for a menstrual leave policy, right? So I mean, a lot of these things like that. And here I'd like to point out a particular example of a company. It's called Pick My Work. It's a startup supported by the Wadhwani Foundation, and we did that last year. It's a gig platform that gives businesses an on-demand sales force. Its co-founder is a lady called Kajal Malik, also a board member and the director in the company. And she ensures that they have more women gig workers. that's the whole vision, right? Creating more gig workers. I mean, because you see a lot of men as gig workers, but you don't see as many women. She pushes for targets for getting women gig workers on their platform. And so this is really we are starting to see the shift happening firsthand when we work with some of these women founders. Yeah, and one last thing that I wanted to mention is that in order to encourage women entrepreneurship, we sort of need multiple factors to work in cohesion. I mean, it's not just one thing here or there, but it's like, expansion of mentorship and networking channels for them. Tailored knowledge and capability building, which of course at Wadhwani Foundation we do, and an enabling and comprehensive policy framework that gives equal access to finance and cultural openness, right? So I mean, these are some of the things that are very, very important for women entrepreneurs.
I think you've captured everything that makes the case for investing and building women entrepreneurship in not just our country, but across the world, because these are things that we try to capture. I'm going to, borrow your answer, because you've touched upon the whole gamut of right from how, women are able to bring in more diversity because they hire other women. And that's so true, because so many businesses that we work with, they are looking to hire more women. Fascinating insight into what Wadhwani Foundation is doing, especially with the fact that we're going into the gig economy as well. So my next question to you is, what are some key trends you are seeing in the growth of women entrepreneurs and the ecosystem? Like, are there some things that you're noticing, especially in the last, I would touch upon the last 2-3 years, because, we've had COVID.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, again, a great question. I think the pandemic, of course, has seen more and more women sort of taking on entrepreneurship. Some by necessity and some by choice, of course. The country has, of course, witnessed the most women-led startups turning into unicorns in 2021. We all know about some of those. I think some of the major startups in that area where they've actually turned into unicorns are run by women are, of course, Nykaa, which is also popular, by Falguni Nayar, and then you've got MobiKwik, which is by Upasna Thakur, and a company called Zolostays, which is Sneha Chaudhary. In fact, yourstory.com, which is run by Shraddha Sharma, is run by a woman also, and now it's become a household name, right? I mean, every startup wants to be part of yourstory.com, and they want to be featured over there, and at least amongst the startup community. In fact, Shraddha, I was talking to her a couple months back, and she has now started a new community in her platform called herstory.com, which is all about creating women-led stories. Another story comes to my mind, and this is a young friend of mine, Neha Bagaria. She runs, you probably have heard of her. I mean, she runs this platform called Jobs for Her, which is India's largest career platform to accelerate women's careers. Their vision is to really enable women to achieve their full potential by enabling them to start, restart, and then rise in their careers. Now, often successful career women, at the prime of their careers, get stuck at home or have to go back to home due to having to move because they just got married, some life event happened, maybe they had kids and therefore they go back to their homes and want to take care of their kids. Or it could just be taking care of older parents. I mean, and all of these unfortunately bring their careers to a grinding halt oftentimes. Of course, things have changed now with remote working and all of that, and I think that definitely helps that end of it. But assuming that they can't do the remote working and it really brings their career to a grinding halt, then when they're ready to go back to work years later, and it could be several years later, it becomes extremely difficult. And this is where I think a company like Jobs for Her comes into for rescue with them, because it really starts by helping such women to restart and repurpose themselves. I think it's a fantastic idea by a fantastic entrepreneur, so hats off to her, what she's done. The other trend that I'm also seeing is that in the last few years, e-commerce and social commerce have boosted women's entrepreneurship to a very large extent. For example, last year, obviously Meesho reached the milestone of 9 million. Yeah, I mean, it's a household name again. 9 million women entrepreneurs on their platform, right? And with more than about 60% of them, they were coming from tier 3 towns, such as Dimapur and Faizabad and Haldwani. I've never even heard of these towns, right? And so I think it's becoming clear that the will and the tenacity to work hard and work hard and then grow are very much there among women across the country. What is also happening as a trend is that you're also starting to see lots of more women get into the whole venture capital world, right? So you have, obviously you have Padmaja Ruparel, who's part of Indian Angels, right? Mani Kola, who's Kalari Capital. You've got Ankita Vashisht, who's a local Bangaloreite over here. You have Paula Mariwala, who's started the seed fund, the Stanford Angels. Shanti Mohan, who's doing, again, very disruptive stuff. Let's Venture, which is bringing lots and lots of startups and VCs and investors together onto one platform. And it's great because women founders often pioneer newer markets and fulfill very untapped customer needs through very innovative processes that are sometimes very related to what women like to do anyway. And the examples for that would be platforms like beauty products for beauty products and women-focused business schools or eco-friendly sanitary products maybe, and maybe even innovative kitchen products, right? So, and these businesses often tend to foster a lot of business innovation and address largely unmet and an often neglected need that is out there in the market. And VCs, who are women VCs, certainly are in a better position to understand the gap and to the potential of such an innovation. So I think these are some of the trends that are happening, which is great for our country. But unfortunately, there are 44 million incremental women that are going to get into the workforce by 2030. So unless we have lots and lots of jobs for them, it may not be the right thing for them at that point. So I think it's very important that we do something about it right now.
Sure. And I'm so glad you brought up about, these are like really interesting trends, and I think you're bang on about all of them. And interestingly, while you're mentioning about investment, I made my first, angel investment into a beauty brand called Ready Set Jet last year. It was a group of female investors who invested in a female-owned brand. I'm talking about funding and VCs in this whole space. Access to funding is the biggest hurdle faced by entrepreneurs, and in particular women entrepreneurs. We know what the numbers are in the industry. So how does one actually create an investable startup? I know it's a very broad question, but if you could share 1, 2, 3 things that someone should keep in mind while creating such a startup from your experience.
Yeah, so before I get started on that, I just kind of remembered when you said you invested in Angel invested in a woman-owned startup. So for example, when I was talking about jobs for her, right? I mean, my wife who started that startup and we exited it successfully, she took a break for almost 4-5 years after that, right? And now she's again embarked on a new startup idea, which is very women focused. Not entirely women focused, but it's into wellness centers and spas and beauty salons and all of that. But it's it does become a challenge when 4-5 years later you want to get started again. But again, I'm just fascinated by the grit and motivation and the ability to get kickstarted right back into where you had been a while back. So just wanted to mention that. But going back to access to funding, I mean, having run multiple startups myself and having created a few successful startups, I'd like to highlight maybe a few ingredients, maybe 2 or 3, that I believe create an investable startups. Now, there's nothing earth-shaking over here. Everyone talks about it, and this applies to anyone. Women or men founders. And I want to briefly touch upon also the women founders and perhaps what is required of them. But I think in general, for an investable startup, you certainly need to have a great execution team. VCs absolutely look out for robust, well-rounded teams with complementary talents. You're always at risk and you would always be doing hard selling if you're a solo founder. You need a team, right? Nobody knows everything, and single person always becomes a risk. So at an early stage, of course, you have no real assets. Your team and your people are your real assets. So to bring about the team together, creating the right culture, very, very important. The second one, and again, the most critical thing in running anything that is investable, is creating great product market fit. You have to build something that people actually want. You have to be able to demonstrate that you're solving a real and actually a growing problem that make the people use your product and also want to pay for it, because unless they're going to pay for it, it's just fluff, and it's a kind of a free product that you're giving away, and it will only last so much. And then of course, that VCs always back growth, really high growth startups. So the rest always becomes PR. But so one really needs to talk to customers, get them a deal, but get them to show actual money, because unless there is money in what you're trying to do, all hell breaks loose, right? So you VCs love that you're creating something that is actually going to bring in money. And then the other thing that VCs like to see, and because they are data crunchers, they believe in what they see in data. You absolutely have to have tons of data ready. You need to keep a lot of the metrics handy while talking with them. It could be, unit economics. It could be around funnel metrics. It could be around your CAC to LTV ratios. It could be revenues in differentiated dimensions. Could be by head count, by time, by campaigns, whatever else. And why do you need all of this? Well, VCs love data, and they also want to know that you're tracking what matters the most, because if you're tracking thousands of other things that don't really matter to the business, it's pointless. So you really need to track what matters most for the business, the kind of business that you're running. And then going beyond these three things that are in general true for every startup, as far as raising funding as a women entrepreneur, there are a few things that women should always keep in mind. I think you have to build a network, right? And women often tend to be have great people skills, and they're good at networking in general. And if you are indeed good at that, then you have to use that to your advantage. And before you start fundraising, know what what it means to raise funding. Know the networks that are out there. In fact, find women angel investors if you're at that startup stage and trying to raise seed funding. I mean, there's lots of angel funds and women-owned funds that are there, which would love to see women-based ideas. So I think essentially one really needs to do their homework properly. The other thing is that women need to believe in themselves, right? I mean, they need to believe in themselves and their business. They need to show their expertise, their confidence, and their grasp of numbers. Because essentially they are their business, right? I mean, it's really them that are actually creating that business. So from the eyes of the investor, the woman that's running the business is the business. So it's really important that they exude that level of confidence. And of course, one should remember that the VCs are investing in that particular founder, and therefore that founder's idea. So they have to get convinced about that particular idea. And then finally, like I said before, I mean, you need to know your numbers really well and be very confident of those figures and the numbers that you're churning.
Fantastic tips. I'm really glad that you touched upon having data metrics and tracking your data, because I feel like this is often something that a lot of business owners miss, and especially I feel it's so true for small business owners. People think like, I'm just starting out, I'm still in my first year. Do I really need to keep all these dashboards and stuff? And then finally, when it's time to actually look at growth, that's when they have to go and number crunch, and then they haven't tracked it, they don't know where to find it, they don't know. So it's really like putting yourself a little bit out of the game and then kind of starting over. So I'm really so glad that you touched it. So thank you for sharing that. And I want to ask you, because you have seen so much, so many entrepreneurs, so many stories. Is there a specific story of transformation or impact that you would like to share with us, the audience, of how entrepreneurship created the impact that you've seen, maybe at the grassroots level, maybe at a different level, but during the course of your work.
Yeah, so I think, I was talking about social e-commerce, right? And I think that's an area that is becoming critically important. And also for us, it's really, really important because it creates a lot of jobs, right? I mean, when you're an e-commerce platform, it requires a lot of people, a lot of large execution teams, etc. So one of the startups that the Wadhwani Foundation has supported, and this startup has certainly had a phenomenal impact and changed many lives. And this one is called Sirohi. The founder is a lady called Gauri Malik. I don't know if you've heard of this company, but she saw the opportunity gap in rural communities where people have immense talent, but they lack the chance and the skill to showcase that talent. And through her startup, she really focuses her efforts on design and craft to create an exclusive range of products that wouldn't just be functional, but would also serve a purpose. She really began making these products in just January of 2019 in Muzaffarnagar, which is in Uttar Pradesh. And their work started with just one woman simply because the rest of them refused. In the rural communities, you see that a lot of women are discouraged from working. And so a lot of these women refused. And so she was the only, this lady was the only one that was working with her. However, once they realized that this was a legitimate source of income, because that is the biggest fear, is this legitimate, right? Am I doing the right thing working? And as soon as these women in the town, they realized it's a legitimate source of income, more and more women joined Gauri. And today they of course have a stronghold of more than 200 women working with them as financially independent equals in their community, which is fabulous. There is another one which is of course again in the social e-commerce platform that we've actually supported. We've given them a grant. Of course today they don't need a grant. They're out to raise millions of dollars now. I wish it was an equity grant that we had taken, but no, it was a grant. This is a company called Frontier Markets, and the person who runs that company is a lady called Sanjay Shah. She returned from New York several years back to start this this social e-commerce platform. What they do is, again, they build, it's kind of reverse of what Sirohi did. They build strong rural marketplaces that connect rural customers to quality products and services. So here they're actually, instead of taking their products to the urban regions, here what they're doing is they're connecting to the rural customers and bringing quality products, high quality products from the urban areas into the rural marketplace. And so their mission, if you look at their website, and I just looked at it some time back, is their mission is to really help 150 million rural consumers join the online market experience with a powerful sales force of 1 million digitally savvy women who they call as Sahayatas. It's a very unique concept. I mean, these women, they were into agriculture. They were earning 10,000-15,000 rupees a year, which is no small amount for somebody in the rural side of things. But today they are earning 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 5 lakh rupees on commissions and on salaries, being Sahayatas and selling, becoming digitally savvy and selling goods to the rural customers.
Yeah, and they get to create impact as well, because look at the social impact that they're creating.
Absolutely. I mean, I find this extremely inspiring and a very accurate representation of how women entrepreneurs can really contribute to boosting the economy and transforming entire communities simultaneously. I mean, she's spread across she's in a lot of different rural areas and communities, and which is fantastic.
Wow, nice. I love stories. So those were really good stories. I'm definitely going to look up Frontier Marketing, you said. So I'll definitely look them
It's
up.
called Frontier Market. Frontier Market. So if you just do a website search on them, you'll find
So,
them.
and we'll drop those links with the interview. So for listeners who are listening in, go check them out and spread the word, of course. And with that, I know you've already touched upon this in our earlier question, but is there anything else that you'd like to add to this question, which is what is one thing you wish women in business knew when they start out? Like common mistakes maybe that you've noticed that they make, which you wish they knew prior to starting out.
I think the first thing is that I've seen some phenomenal women entrepreneurs who somehow underestimate their value. And we all know that there's a wage gap in most countries, including in India, of course, more so in India. So I think sometimes women often fall into the trap of just talking what is offered to them with gratitude, right? In order to truly succeed in business, I think what women need to learn is to need to really own up to who they really are and really need to recognize their capability. Women should really be asking or demanding what they need to be successful, and not just take it for granted and basically ask for help and take it in form of gratitude, right? I mean, you have to, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, you have to believe in yourself and be confident of what you are. I think that is one area that I think is very important, and I think the secret to scaling up isn't usually about doing more of what you are doing and working longer hours. It's really finding the right internal systems and processes for your financing, the finances itself, the marketing side of things, the sales and operations is crucial. Women often tend to be perfectionists. They often take on a lot more onto themselves. Even though that they have the ability to delegate, I mean, they are above $1 million, of course they can delegate a lot of the functions to others who are perhaps better than them in a lot of ways. But oftentimes women don't end up doing that because they feel that they can do it better themselves, and perhaps that's because they are perfectionists, right? So I think they need to sort of move away from that. So I think I would just leave it at that.
Yeah, you're talking to a recovering perfectionist, so I hear you loud and clear. And to all the people at the back again, quit being a perfectionist, take it from the man himself. And you have been a serial entrepreneur, Mr. Shah. What is like one of the best business lessons you've learned from your own journey?
Yeah, and this I can say because it's kind of related to my last one of my last startups, and I think it will keep reminding me all my life. Don't build a business just because it's exciting or it is at the leading edge of technology. I'm a technology guy. I mean, I love things that are at the leading sometimes at the bleeding edge of technology, like a metaverse type of a thing, But don't build a business just because it's exciting. Don't build it because it's at the leading edge of technology or it is considered to be state of the art. That just doesn't work. Instead, you want to build a business that is single-mindedly focused on solving the needs of your target market and holding true to its true value proposition. So again, like I said, I mean, an example of what not to do is one of my startup ideas. That sounded like a great idea, very disruptive, very cool, and we thought it would be the best thing since sliced bread, right? I mean, but at the end of the day, while all of the above that I just mentioned were all true, it was exciting, it was kind of sexy, I mean, it was very cool. It didn't really solve the pain point of the customer, or it was too overcrowded a market. We were not able to come out differentiating ourselves and pitch. I mean, that 30-second pitch is very, very important. People talk about a 30-second pitch. Unless you're able to convince somebody within the 30 seconds that this is a good idea, it's not worth it. So it's very, very important that you solve a business problem. And ultimately, obviously we had to exit out of that business. We got, we managed to sell it, but not very successfully, right? So that's one thing. The second lesson, of course, is a myth, and I think this is again a very, very important thing, and this may be very difficult to explain it in a short time like this, but it's a myth that you need a very highly experienced domain expert if you want to build a business around a certain very disruptive verticalized sector. So in fact, it's just the opposite. For example, if let's say, take an example of a logistics startup, right? You get a very highly experienced logistics person, somebody who's been there, done it 15, 20 years. You will never be able to build a disruptive idea, as the traditional way of doing things in the age-old business that logistics is will always get in the way of creating something that's disruptive. In fact, it's a good idea to bring in somebody fresh, show them the problems that are there and solve it using non-traditional ideas that are highly disruptive. So, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm making myself...
No, you are great advice. So you're saying there's still hope for me, even though I'm a business coach, to go into crypto and try to sell some specific crypto, even though I know nothing.
Absolutely. Go for it.
All right.
So long as it solves a business idea, not just because it's crypto.
Okay. Yeah. I have to keep lesson 1 in mind before I implement advice number 2. With that, we are talking so much about advice and everything that we've learned. What do you think is the most overrated advice in business that you hear?
Yeah, overrated advice. I mean, I would say I've not thought of this very well, but I think most people talk about, to build a great business, you need a very highly experienced all-star A team, right? While it is true in a lot of sense, and in fact my previous answer was about building a good team, what you really need is a great team. And in that great team, what you really need is one that you really need to instead focus on building a team that shares the vision of what you're trying to do, is highly collaborative in nature, and is known to have worked together in the past, and has a fantastic execution capability. If you look at Messi and Ronaldo on their own, obviously they've all scored the highest number of goals ever, right? But as far as winning a World Cup is concerned, they have not, right? So I think it's more important, it's less important to win the battles, more important to win the war. I mean, you need that team that can actually make things happen together in a very collaborative fashion and can help each other to a very large extent.
Yeah, I hear what you say, but I still feel like this is the most challenging thing to do, right? To understand that and to implement. So again, great input. And now I want to ask you another question about Wadhwani Foundation. Can you share a recent initiative with our audience that by Wadhwani Foundation, which has supported women entrepreneurs? Is there something that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of examples, but I mean, I can share one very, very recent one. And we've always taken the effort and initiative to empower women. I mean, throughout our life cycle. We've not done enough, I must confess. We could do more. But recently, for instance, one of our flagship initiatives is called National Entrepreneurship Network. And here, in collaboration with IIM at Nagpur, recently we launched a very special cohort of women founders, and basically we work with a lot of incubators in a variety of different universities and colleges, and this was part of the IIM Nagpur cohort of entrepreneurs that were in their incubator. And what they will get is the ability to get to learn about maximizing the startup success, and also enabling them to reach to an investable stage. We'll, of course, through their life cycle of those 14 weeks that they are with us, they are part of our Ignite and what we call as Liftoff programs. We will provide them with one-to-one mentorship and some level of access to funding, because a lot of times, when you're a startup, very early stage startup, you tend not to spend money on consultants and service providers that can actually provide you a tremendous amount of value. Sometimes even mentors might give you pro bono advice, but then for certain things they obviously have to charge because it's more of a long running thing. We also want to have the ability to actually fund that part of the expenses of that particular consulting fee that the service provider or a mentor charges. Service provider example would be a digital marketing company that you need to sort of get your website ready and then be able to start doing organic marketing out of that. And so we provide some of that. So that's a recent example.
I love anything that is about cohorts, incubators, accelerators. So I love that, you're doing so much in this space in terms of the education learning support that is required at this stage really for women to be able to, like you said, lift off or take off into the next level. And with that, I want to bring, as we come towards the end of our interview, back to you. What does a day in your life look like?
Oh, what does a day in my life look like? Okay. Well, it depends upon which era of my life. They've always been very, very different.
Right now, I guess.
Okay, so right now, I'm suddenly very fascinated with yoga because I play golf and I think my wife pushed me to doing yoga and it's tremendously helping me to improve my game of golf. So I start my day with yoga and it's very therapeutic and I enjoy doing that. And then once I do intermittent fasting, so typically I have a break in eating food for 16 hours. We are basically work from home for about 3 days out of 5 days. Only 2 days is at work. So I tend to keep all my reviews and all my meetings on Tuesdays and Wednesdays when I'm at work. But other than that, I speak to a lot of customers, a lot of our beneficiaries, just to understand their pain, their reason for attaching themselves with us, and what is it that we can do better for them. So that's an important aspect for me, and it has always been throughout my life, because I think it's really ultimately the customer's pain point that you're trying to solve in whatever you're doing, and that's what you do. And then I said, like I said, I mean, team building is of course important. Work from home doesn't really help resonate a lot with that, but we try to do a little bit here and there, and I like to participate in that to a large extent. And then in evenings, I have started one day a night that I do a Gita class, Bhagavad Gita class, and that's that's been fascinating. We have a fantastic person who teaches us, very similar to what we all do. I'm a very normal person, but teaches Gita, and she does it in a fabulous way. So love it.
Very fascinating. I love this question. And finally, a motto that you live by, or a favorite quote. It could be either or.
I have a few favorite quotes, but I think at this juncture, I think I like this one, which is "Age is just a number." And and particularly because we spoke about a lot of the startups, and I mean, if you look at Falguni Nair, for example, right? She started her Nykaa at 50, and today she's 59, has taken Nykaa public, full of grit and motivation to take it to the next level. And actually, closer home for me, the chairman of our foundation, the guy, the person who's actually putting on all this funding into the foundation, Ramesh Wadhwani, he's 75, and believe you me, he has more energy and passion that I've not seen in most people that are around me right now, or myself also. So it's fascinating. So I think age is just a number. It's just there's so much time that is there to be able to do so much at any phase of your life.
With that, I think that's a great quote to close our conversation with. Thank you so much for your time. I was going to actually ask you, I see a ton of books behind you. I'm an avid reader, and I was going to ask you what's your favorite. But, if you'd like to share that, of course, I'm sure you have many. Everybody hates that question. All book readers seem to say there are many.
Yeah, these are all books that I used to read, but now I've moved to Kindle. And, I keep lying to, because I work with a lot of startups and to also with SMEs and with the changing world that we are in right now. There is a book by Eric Rice, which I think a lot of people in the startup world have read, and it's called Lean Startup. I keep lying, going back to it once in a while because it's so critically important. And the other one that I don't remember the author, but I'm reading it right now is Spirituality in Golf. And it's a very interesting story.
Sure. All right. And with that, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time. I've enjoyed this conversation and I hope you have too. And I hope our audience has a lot to take away. There's so much that you've shared. It's a masterclass. Like I say, each conversation is a masterclass in itself. And of course, I will be sharing all the links of Wadhwani Foundation as well for our audience to connect, get in touch and see if they can contribute, be a part of the story, be the part of the growth story of the foundation as well and other entrepreneurs. With that, thank you so much for your time and thank you for being here with me today.
Thanks to you, Savitha. I think really enjoyed talking with you and great questions. Thank you very much for that. And hopefully the audience can take away a few points here and there.